We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Prime Minister told ABC Melbourne, I quote, "Fuel supplies have not been disrupted." Tonight, the Prime Minister will deliver an emergency address to the nation. Prime Minister, what has changed since yesterday?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Nothing has changed since yesterday. Neither this government's resolve to deal with issues of supply and cost of living or the opposition's approach to these issues, which are outlined in their talking points that are out there for all to see. They're talking points that suggested rather than act responsibly, what they would do was talk up issues that are facing Australians. The issues are real. The war in the Middle East is real.
Order. Members on my left, would just allow the Prime Minister to update the House on this issue. Order.
The war in the Middle East is absolutely real, and that is why I certainly agree with the statement, which is real as well. Well, I'm actually talking to Andrew Hastie, the Deputy Liberal Leader in the House of Representatives, said this, and this will be consistent with what I will say tonight. This is where every Australian has to just keep calm and carry on, do what they can to look after themselves and their neighbours. We've got a lot of oil and gas and other precious commodities trapped in the Persian Gulf behind the Strait of Hormuz. So until the war is resolved, we're going to feel supply pressures. That was real when the member for Canning said it. It's real when every member of the government understands it. But it's also real to say that every single shipload of fuel that was due to come here in March arrived on schedule. That is absolutely true. And what is required at times like this is to be considered, be orderly, work through issues, not to pretend there aren't challenges, and the government doesn't pretend that. They're being faced by the entire world, whether it be issues of supply down the track or whether it be income pressures that are on people, which is why we've acted on both of those issues in a responsible and orderly way, which is how my government operates.
The call to the honourable member for Aston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government helping to shield Australians from the worst of the impacts of the war in the Middle East?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the fantastic member for Aston, who 3 years ago today became the first government member to win a seat off the opposition in the House of Representatives in 100 years. In 100 years. And then turned that victory in a by-election into being re-elected as the member for Aston last May. Now, the war in the Middle East has caused the biggest spike in global fuel prices in history, and Australians are feeling and seeing that across the economy. I know people are doing it tough, which is why we've acted to make a real difference. From today, we've halved the fuel excise, directly helping families and businesses save 26 cents per litre at the pump. We're backing truckies, slashing the heavy vehicle road user charge to zero, and making sure that they get paid fairly and on time with the legislation that we brought before the Parliament just last week. Australia's National Strategic Reserve is now law, so that shiploads of fuel, fertiliser and other essentials can flow into our economy. And we're giving small business more economic breathing room and support through the Australian Taxation Office and the measures that we've taken there. Leaders across state and federal jurisdictions have adopted the National Fuel Security Plan. Importantly as well, adopted across the political spectrum, as well by the 8 states and territories, as well as the Commonwealth, so that we're ready for what may come in an orderly way. Planning, making sure that we put in place those procedures. No government can eliminate all of the pressure which is on right around the world. That's just the truth, and we're being straight with people about that. There are challenges ahead, but no matter what the world throws at us, we can take action, and we will continue to take action. And we'll do it in the Australian way, backing in our national interest, securing our economic resilience, making sure that any measures that we take to deal with short-term issues also set us up to be more resilient in the future, learning the lessons that are there from being at the end of supply chains, and making sure that we deliver real support to people that make a positive difference as well. Navigating those rough seas which are there at the moment, but always with our eyes on the horizon as well, on the future.
Give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister, and I refer to his previous answer. On Monday, the Prime Minister's statements included Australia's fuel supply outlook remains secure, and there is more fuel available today than there was prior to the war commencing. Since then, has the government received advice of any additional fuel carriers bound for Australia that have been delayed or cancelled?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
The advice that I gave the Parliament on Monday was correct. Every single ship that was due to arrive here in March arrived. That is just a fact. And of the 81 ships that were due to arrive here in April, 6 of those were cancelled. They were more than replaced by 6 plus 3, 9 additional ships arriving. In addition to that, of course, extra fuel is available from that produced here, because what we did was change the standards for both petrol and diesel, so that every bit of fuel that's produced here is kept here domestically as well. So that adds to supply as we go through. We continue to engage as well with our international partners. There's a range of further discussions will take place over future days, including over Easter. We'll continue to engage with our partners. We're a reliable supplier of energy security around our region. We expect that to be reciprocated.
The Prime Minister's concluded his answer. Order. The Leader of the Opposition will take his seat. Order. The House comes to order. We'll hear from the Honourable Member for Barton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. What steps is the Albanese Labor government taking to help Australians with cost of living pressures brought on by the war in the Middle East, and how does that compare to other approaches?
Call to the Treasurer.
Speaker, what a wonderful addition to this parliament the member for Barton is already. I thank her for the question and her work in her local community in Sydney. All of Australia, indeed all of the world's economies, are going through a very substantial shock. And the people of Australia didn't choose these circumstances, but they are paying a very hefty price for them at the petrol bowser, but also more broadly as well. We acknowledge that, we understand that, but more than that, we're acting to step up and step in where we responsibly can to help people through a difficult period. Now, a big part of our efforts is working with industry, with states and territories, with international partners, with regulators, with unions, with communities and with others, to make sure that we are working together as much as we can to work through these serious issues in a serious way, befitting the pressures that we know Australians are feeling right around the country. And so our plan, whether it's about securing supply, making sure the distribution is working, cracking down on the rip-offs, helping with the cost of living and helping small business, all of that is about working in a cooperative way, a collaborative way where we can. And today, the Minister for Small Business, and supported by the Assistant Treasurer and others, brought together the peak business groups, the BCA and COSBOA, as well as the ABA, the Banking Association, to see what we could do to make sure in particular that our small businesses are being well supported. I want to thank the Small Business Minister for her work in this regard. And it also means, when it comes to the Tax Office, that the Tax Office is being supportive and flexible where it can, recognising the temporary pressures that a lot of wonderful Australian small businesses are feeling as a consequence of the war in the Middle East. Earlier this week, we cut the excise, halved the excise, to provide cost of living relief for motorists and truckies as well. The work done by the Transport Minister and others with the PM to ensure that that relief is already flowing. We've seen reports from the NRMA that that relief is already flowing today. Obviously, the full benefit will be felt in the coming days, but the NRMA has made it clear that that relief is already flowing. I've asked the ACCC to provide us with a report today on how that rollout is happening. So, Mr Speaker, the contrast here is really clear, and we see the contrast in the leaked coalition talking points that we read about this morning. This is a government working through serious issues in a serious way. What we know from these talking points, Mr Speaker, is that those opposite are desperately hoping that Australia fails. We know from their talking points they're desperately hoping that Australia fails because they see a political opportunity in that for them. Mr Speaker, is it any wonder that they were performing better under Susan Lee than they are under the member for Hume?
Treasurer's time has concluded. Before I give the next call, I'll just do some acknowledgements. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is a Commonwealth Games Australian delegation, including Ben Houston, the President of the Commonwealth Games Australia, Craig Phillips AM of Commonwealth Games Australia, Patria Thomas, the Chef de Mission for Glasgow 2026, and Cody Lynch. We're also welcoming today Councillor Jill Whittaker, OAM, the Mayor of Campbelltown, as a guest of the member for Sturt. And also I see Mrs Yvette Darth, the former member for Petrie in this place and the former Attorney-General and Minister for Justice in the Queensland State Parliament. And in the Southern Gallery is a group of students and teachers from Corrine Senior High School, visiting from the electorate of Moore. Welcome to you all. And I'll give the call to the honourable member for Clark.
Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, many Australians have lobbied tirelessly for gambling advertising reform. So you can imagine how interested we are in today's media report that the government is set to announce some reforms. To be clear, they are only a first step, though, because they will only partly address just one of the 31 recommendations in the Murphy report. So what is the veracity of today's report, and what's the government's plan to address the other 30 recommendations?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much. The government has not made any decisions. We work things through in an orderly way, as I've said. To previous questions regarding gambling reform, we haven't concluded what we're doing. We've worked through and continuing to consult appropriate interested parties, including members of the crossbench. But I've made it also very clear that my view is probably different, it's fair to say, from the member for Clark. With respect, he's long been an advocate in these issues. I think that we need to get absolutely the balance right between people's right to have a punt and the view that I have, which is that it is too prevalent and that people, particularly young people, should be able to watch sport and not see a link between sport necessarily and gambling, that we need to de-link those issues. The government continues to work on these issues, and I don't know with regard to the member for Clark's suggestion about what's been supported and what hasn't been. When the government makes decisions, which we make collectively, we then announce them.
I'll give a call to the honourable member for Chisholm.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. With the war in the Middle East disrupting global supply chains, how has the Albanese Labor government acted to strengthen Australia's fuel security?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for her question and likewise congratulate her on her contribution in this House in the time that she's been here. She's a much-valued colleague, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, securing Australia's fuel supply has been the focus for this government since the 28th of February, Mr Speaker. Since the National Security Committee met at 8 o'clock in the morning on the day after the bombing of Iran, Mr Speaker, that has been our focus, and in all the meetings since. It's been our focus when we changed the fuel quality standards. It's been our focus when we released 20% of the strategic reserve. It's been our focus when we changed the diesel standards. All actions undertaken by this government, not called for by the opposition, not suggested by the opposition. The opposition, when we've done it, says they've been too late, even though they've never suggested them in the meantime, Mr Speaker, never called for those actions. But it's also what's driven our legislation in relation to giving Export Finance Australia the capacity to support Australian importers and refiners to go and get the fuel that is available in the world for Australians, Mr Speaker. And I'm pleased to tell the House that the legislation, of course, passed the House on Monday, passed the Senate tonight, and will be submitted to Her Excellency the Governor-General for signature this evening, Mr Speaker, and subject to her agreement will be the law of the land and will be implemented tomorrow. But, Mr Speaker, we're not waiting. I can also tell the House that Export Finance Australia has been in detailed conversation with 10 separate companies about going and getting those cargoes, and those conversations started on Sunday. On Sunday, Mr Speaker, just after the Prime Minister and I announced this intervention. So this gives us the best chance, in a very difficult international environment, with supply chains under real pressure, from the Middle East. Mr Speaker, it gives us the best chance to go and get those cargoes for Australians where we want them in the national interest, and that's a good thing. And we also continue our engagement with our supply partners, our international partners. This morning I met with my friend and much-valued colleague, the Singaporean Minister for Energy, Dr. Seeling Tan, who is in Australia at the moment to discuss the energy crisis. I had a very good chat with him. He informed me he's gone to see Senate question time, which I told him was a very poor choice on his behalf, Mr Speaker, but nevertheless he's in the Senate chamber as we speak. And he assured me, as Prime Minister Wong assured Prime Minister Albanese earlier this week, that Singapore regards their role in supplying our liquid fuel security most seriously indeed. Tomorrow I'll be meeting with my Brunei ministerial counterpart, Dato Azmi, Mr Speaker, another important supplier for Australia, and that discussion is important as well in terms of ensuring the flow of energy between our two great nations, Brunei and Australia. So whether it's international engagement or giving our agencies the tools they need to get the job done, securing Australia's fuel security has been our focus since February 28.
Give a call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Minister for Climate Change and Energy said, quote, "The truth is all the ships are arriving," end quote. But there are reports today government ministers have cancelled travel and events in April. Has the government received advice of any additional fuel ships bound for Australia that have been delayed or cancelled?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. If he's referring to what was a proposed trip by myself for Anzac Day in Gallipoli on April 25, yes, because of the circumstances of travel to Turkey at the moment, obviously I have cancelled it. I've prioritised what we are dealing with at the moment, engaging with our regional partners. That's the responsible and the right thing to do.
Give a call to the honourable member for Macarthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Transport. What work is the Albanese Labor government doing to support Australians and the transport industry feeling the impacts of war in the Middle East, and who is standing in the way?
Give a call to the Minister for Infrastructure, the Minister for Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Can I thank very much the member for Macarthur, and I know he won't mind me saying this, but I know he's a very proud dad of his son, who I first met on the Western Sydney Airport construction site. He's a great construction worker. I understand he's now working on the M6, another terrific project for Western Sydney, so I do want to shout out to him. We have been working really closely with the transport and fuel industries to make sure we're all working off the same information and tackling challenges as they arise. This morning, the Treasurer, alongside the Minister for Small Business and the Assistant Minister, announced that the ATO will provide temporary relief to businesses unable to meet their tax obligations. We're also making it easier and faster for small businesses to access credit and working with banks on options for loan deferrals and other supports for customers doing it tough. I spoke last week with Tim, one of my local freight owners in Ballarat, and he told me these, amongst the fuel, excise and road user charges, were very much needed. They are happening alongside our temporary 3-month halving of fuel excise and reducing the heavy road user charge to 0 for 3 months. This will reduce the costs of moving essential goods across the country, taking pressure off every part of our supply chain. That helps Australians as they do the weekly grocery shop, visit Bunnings or make purchases from a local small business. And they've been welcomed by industry. This morning I spoke with the Australian Trucking Association, who told us these changes will really help road freight operators feeling the pinch of high fuel prices. Road Freight New South Wales said it provided immediate and meaningful relief to operators, and the Australian retail sector has called the measures critical for retailers facing increased freight and shipping costs. This, of course, builds on the work that we've already done, releasing 20% of the minimum stockholding obligation, underwriting additional cargoes so we can get more fuel, fertiliser and other essential goods into Australia, amending the fuel standards for petrol and diesel to allow more supply into the market, strengthening the ACCC's hand, doubling penalties for companies found guilty of unfairly raising fuel prices, changing the Fair Work Act so transport operators can renegotiate their contracts quickly to help cover rising fuel costs, and of course working with our regional partners, whether it's Singapore or Korea, to shore up supply, strengthen energy security and support the flow of essential goods. Just some of the practical actions this government has taken within this week alone. From peak bodies to unions to small operators, we have been taking these actions because they have told us that they are vital and urgent. Meanwhile, we see from the Coalition's leaked talking points that they're being instructed to tell Australians that despite we do having a clear plan, that they're going to pretend that there's no plan, and despite our work to secure fuel supply, they're out there heightening fears within the community.
Order.
No leadership from the leader of the opposition.
Has concluded. Give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister commit to releasing on a daily basis the latest information on A, the number of service stations which are out of fuel, B, detailed fuel stock holdings by location, and C, the number of ships which are bound for Australia and how many have been cancelled or delayed?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
I'll commit to continuing to be transparent, continuing to provide information, as myself and the Energy Minister have done, continue to be engaged as we have, not just in this parliament but in the multiple press conferences that we've had before the entire... I've held more press conferences in the last month or so here in Canberra than his predecessor did in the previous 3 years. So tomorrow I'll be at the National Press Club, again being accountable to the entire population.
The Prime Minister has concluded his answer. The Manager will resume your seat. The Manager will resume your seat. Order. Order. When the House comes to order. When the House comes to order. Order. I want to hear from the Leader of the House.
Speaker, there's a new habit from the Manager of Opposition Business that when he stands there and doesn't get the call, he shouts anyway. And just remind. Well, the microphone's not on. No one hears you do it, but it just doesn't help with the order of the House.
Order. On the point of order, the manager is entitled to respond.
Speaker, the Prime Minister was baiting me, and that's why I just
Resume your
respond.
seat. Yeah. Resume your seat. Yeah. All right. Order. 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 The member for Bennelong. Order. I'm trying to bring the House to order, and I'll just remind all members it would assist greatly if people are taking points of order, they wait for the call and they simply state the point of order, and we'll all have a happy life. At least my life will be happier. Give the call to the Chief Government Whip.
Why, thank you, Speaker. Patience is a virtue. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government easing pressures on the road transport industry?
Call to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Lawler for her question and, of course, her ongoing advocacy for truck drivers right across this country. The spike in fuel prices as a result of the conflict in the Middle East is putting pressure on families and businesses. Of course, our government recognises these are challenging times for Australians, including for our road transport industry. And that is why the Albanese Labor government has taken swift action to secure our fuel supplies and ease pressures on businesses, households, truckies and the transport sector. Our government, of course, has reduced the heavy vehicle road user charge to zero from today for 3 months to help truckies continue their vital work for our nation. The government has also deferred the next scheduled increase in the heavy vehicle road user charge by 6 months. In addition to these measures, we have halved the fuel excise for 3 months to make fuel cheaper for Australians. Now, these measures are making a real difference across Australia, including our road transport industry. The Australian Trucking Association Chair, Mark Parry, describes these combined measures as a lifeline. Now, in addition to these measures, I am very pleased to inform the House that Labor's Fairer Fuel Bill has passed the Senate on Monday. This bill creates an urgent pathway with a high threshold that allows truckies and transport operators to argue for a fairer share. Now, Labor's Fairer Fuel Bill has been welcomed right across the transport industry by the industry operators, the owner drivers and, of course, the unions. Frank, a truck driver who was in Parliament this week, said the amendment would go a long way to helping truckies manage rising costs. But I am pleased to report to the House today that these laws are already having an impact. Zach, a truck driver, told me that the passage of these laws is already making a difference by encouraging negotiations. He said businesses are now coming to the party to make sure our higher fuel costs are covered, and this is a good thing. Truckies and transport operators like Zach and Frank deserve the increase in fuel costs caused by the conflict in the Middle East to be shared fairly across the supply chain and not be forced to shoulder these rising costs alone. It is only a Labor government that has and will take strong action to secure our fuel supply and help people with cost of living and keep Australia moving.
Call to the member for Moncrief.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, the Queensland LNP government is using its powers to fast-track drilling for oil in the Taroom Trough. Given our national fuel crisis, will Labor work with the Coalition to fast-track approvals for Australian oil projects, including the Taroom Trough, so our country can build our own energy security?
To the call to the Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr Speaker. The Coalition won't be involved in this. The Queensland LNP is the Queensland government. I work constructively with the Crisafulli government. When it comes to any proposals, they go through our environmental laws, which we improved last year without the support of those opposite, so that what we can do is actually do things faster and more efficiently.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Bass.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. How is the Albanese Labor government helping our farmers, fishers and producers to manage the impacts of conflict in the Middle East and to continue producing food for millions of Australians and our international neighbours?
The call to the Minister for Agriculture, the Minister for Fisheries and the Ministry for Forestry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank my fabulous Tasmanian colleague, the member for Bass. And I know that the member for Bass has been talking to her farmers and primary producers in her electorate, like many people in this building have, about how the war in the Middle East is impacting them at the moment and impacting globally. And certainly we understand that the work our farmers and foresters do underpins our food security, our regional economies, our national economy and, of course, our critical trading relationships. And of course, over recent weeks, we do know that they have been facing some challenges due to this war in the Middle East and its global impacts. And that's why our government has been working day and night to help ease the pressure on our farmers and our fishers. We know that front of mind for our food producers is the fuel and the fertiliser, which is why we've been taking action to keep Australia moving and our farmers farming. We've passed legislation to underwrite the purchase of fuel and fertiliser by the private sector to help get these critical inputs into Australia and to our farmers that need them. We've, of course, halved the fuel excise on petrol and diesel. We've amended the petrol and the diesel standards and we're releasing up to 20% of our strategic fuel stockpile to get more fuel into our regions where our farmers need it. Because we understand how important particularly diesel is for our farmers, for keeping our trawlers and our fishing vessels moving and for ensuring our heavy vehicles can continue to deliver our world-class food and fibre. Our fertiliser supply working group is set to have its first meeting tomorrow. This group will build on the work already underway in our government and across industry to help improve the availability of fertiliser for our farmers. We've heard also from the Treasurer today, of course, how we're helping small businesses, including our farmers and our fishers, to access credit by extending the Small Business Responsible Lending Obligation exemption. And, of course, how the ATO will be establishing hardship measures which will also help our ag and our fishing industries. As I said yesterday, with engagement with the industry, we have taken the decision to defer the full cost recovery for export services for 1 year until 1 July 2027. And as the Chief Executive of the Australian Meat Industry Council, Tim Ryan, said yesterday, and I quote, "They have listened and they have responded to industry concerns." And, Mr Speaker, that is exactly what our government has been doing this whole time with the war in the Middle East. We have been working with industry, listening to their concerns, working together in the national interests, because all of us in this place and right across the country need to be working in the national interest, not going around with talking points to undermine what the government and industry are trying to do together. We should all be working to help shield all Australians, including our farmers and our fishers, from some of the worst impacts of this conflict in the Middle East.
Before I call the member for Bradfield, I'd also like to welcome the Mayor of Mackay, Councillor Greg Williamson, as the guest of the member for Dawson. Give the call to the honourable member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. The government's East Coast gas reservation is due to start next year. It will compel the 3 Queensland LNG exporters to reserve up to 25% of our gas for domestic market. While most gas producers support the scheme, some like Beach and Senex have asserted that it could crush gas supplies. Minister, at the same time as you work urgently to end our reliance on costly fossil fuels, will the government stand firm on the domestic gas reservation scheme to ensure that our resources work for us and not multinational corporations?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for Energy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for the question. The answer is that we are very much, absolutely, confirmed and determined to introduce the gas reservation policy announced by the Minister for Resources and I just before Christmas. And we announced it would start on the 1st of January 2027, although we announced that also from the date of announcement we would regard any contracts entered into at that point as being new and therefore covered by the new regime. The Minister for Resources and I have been consulting very deeply. We called for submissions in December. Those call for submissions closed about a fortnight ago. We received, I think it's 53 submissions that the Minister and I have been working through very carefully. We are now engaged in detailed design. There are a number of elements that need to be determined in close consultation with industry. And by industry, I don't just mean gas producers, I also mean heavy industry gas users. We are talking to both sides of the equation, if I put it that way. That's what a good government does, consults deeply. But ultimately the Cabinet will decide the parameters of the gas reservation on the recommendation jointly of the Minister of Resources and I, and we intend to make sure it works for Australians, because the gas that's under our soil and our waters should be gas that the Australian people have first rights to when it comes to the needs of heavy industry and the Australian energy system.
Give the call to the honourable member for Holt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services. In the face of global instability, how is the Albanese Labor government taking practical action to protect Australians from rising cost of living pressures and crack down on unfair fees and hidden charges?
Give the call to the Assistant Treasurer and the Minister for Financial Services.
Speaker, I thank the amazing member for Holt, who's been an absolute champion for consumers throughout her time in this place. Speaker, we know that Australian families, Australian workers, farmers and businesses are doing it tough right now. Conflict in the Middle East means higher fuel costs, higher inflation and supply pressures. That's why the Albanese government is focused on strong, practical action that makes a real difference to household budgets and helps Australians deal with cost of living pressures right now. We've acted to make fuel cheaper for the people who need it by halving the fuel excise and reducing the road user charge for heavy vehicles to zero, cutting costs for families at the Bowser and for truck drivers moving goods across the country. And to ensure these savings are passed on, we've backed that up by increasing maximum penalties for price gouging to $100 million, so unfair and illegal profiteering is met with real consequences. Today we also welcomed efforts by regulators and industry.
The member for Fisher has been interjecting all throughout question time. So you'll leave the chamber. Constantly in the last answer and this answer, that voice continues to chime in. And don't act surprised, because if people are going to continually interject non-stop, everyone's had a pretty good go this week, but people have just got to control themselves. The Minister will continue.
Today, we also welcomed efforts by regulators and industry that provide support at this difficult time. Through greater flexibility in the tax and in the banking systems, practical support to ensure businesses can continue operating, employing Australians and delivering essential goods and services. And we're also cracking down on unfair business practices that quietly drain family budgets. Whether it's hidden fees added at the last click or subscriptions that are hard to cancel, this government, through the hard work of the Assistant Minister, Lee, who introduced legislation to ban unfair trading practices today, is putting a stop to business tactics that cost Australians time and money and which sap their confidence. By strengthening protection against unfair contract terms, banning unfair trading practices, tackling subscription traps and banning drip pricing, we're cracking down on sneaky tactics that quietly rip people off. There are many products that deliver little or no value. Subscriptions to news sites that you only use once, ongoing charges for apps that your kids downloaded, or membership of the Liberal Party. That's because, while under our consumer laws...
Order. No. There is. The Minister was. I'll deal with this. I know what you don't need to say it, so you can resume your seat. You don't need to say. The Minister wasn't asked about opposition policies or talking points, so we're just going to ask the Minister to be directly relevant. There was no tag in that question.
On this side of the chamber, we've been getting on with the job. Yesterday, we supported the Reserve Bank's decision to ban card surcharging. This puts an end to excessive and confusing fees at the checkout, particularly when families are under pressure and every dollar counts. These had been nuisance fees which had been rightly annoying consumers for too long, and it's this government that had acted. And while supporting Australians and standing up for consumers is in this government's DNA, the opposition, as always, continues to oppose or delay practical support. In uncertain times, Australians expect their government to be on their side, and that is exactly what we're doing.
Call to order. Give the call to the honourable member for Mallee.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Under the so-called National Fuel Security Plan, can the Prime Minister list who will be classified as a critical user?
Order. No. The Minister for Infrastructure, I can't hear the question. It's a two-way street. I've got to hear the question and then I've got to hear the answer. Order. I'm going to ask, out of respect for the member Mallee, to begin her question again so I can hear the question.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Under the so-called National Fuel Security Plan, can the Prime Minister list who will be classified as a critical user?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question. I note that in the question it speaks about the so-called National Fuel Security Plan. I hope that the member has informed Premier Rockcliffe, Premier Crisafulli and Leah Finocchiaro in the Northern Territory that she doesn't regard the hard work that was done over the weekend to produce the National Fuel Security Plan, and in the many days afterwards, I was asked about the National Fuel Security Plan, and I'm asking.
Order, members on my left.
And I am asking, and I am answering it.
Just everyone. The leader of the Nationals in the House of Representatives. Look, I showed a great deal of respect for the member for Mallee. We just can't have a free-for-all. It's not on. Questions are going to be heard in silence. So the courtesy was given to one side. Do the same to the Prime Minister as well, or any other minister answering a question. The Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I was asked about the National Cabinet document that was agreed unanimously at National Cabinet. And we know from their talking points, backed up by the questions that they've asked here today, that they actually want things to get harder for Australians because they think it will be better for them. Because they think it will be better for them.
Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? The member for Brisbane has the call. Order. No, when the House comes to order, the member for Brisbane is now going to be heard in silence.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. How is the current fuel crisis impacting housing construction, and how is the Albanese Labor government responding?
Give a call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Speaker, I thank the member for Brisbane for her question, and I acknowledge her outstanding advocacy for better housing opportunities for her wonderful constituents. Mr. Speaker, the war in the Middle East is already having an impact on Australia's economy, and as Housing Minister, I'm particularly concerned about the effect on housing construction. At the outset, Speaker, I want to acknowledge the enormously constructive way that this sector has engaged with me and with our government on some of the challenges that they are facing. The Master Builders Association, HIA, civil contractors, construction workers and others have been meeting regularly with me and my office and helping us understand the situation that they face today and indeed what is likely to happen over the coming weeks. Speaker, they are strong partners of ours and enormously strong advocates for their members. Industry have been really clear with us about two main things, Speaker. First, of course, construction is an essential industry to our country. It is also amongst the largest users of diesel across the Australian economy. So when fuel prices rise, when supply is disrupted in some way, that flows directly and immediately onto our construction industry and to our builders.
Speaker, fuel is also a key part of the manufacturing process of materials that builders rely on. I think the Parliament would be aware of the discussion that's been happening in recent weeks, particularly about PVC piping. That is a good where oil is a direct input, and, Speaker, we usually buy that product from other countries which are experiencing issues managing the fuel shortages. Speaker, there is one very important and immediate priority that the sector have put to me, and that is our government doing everything that we can to secure fuel supply. And that is why the work of the Prime Minister and the work of the Energy Minister that they've spoken to the Parliament about this week is so important to our economy. Speaker, the Minister for Energy has talked about releasing fuel reserves, adjusting standards so we can stretch supply further, the work of the Export Finance Corporation and the government using those global and diplomatic channels that we have to make sure that we're at the front of the queue for future supply. Speaker, the work with National Cabinet, of course, is absolutely essential. Those state premiers helping us to make sure that fuel is getting to the parts of the country where it's most needed. Speaker, the Treasurer and the Small Business Minister's announcements today about some of that leniency and support that will be offered to small business is absolutely critical for construction. I think the Parliament would understand that this is a sector that is heavily dominated by small and micro businesses, and they are going to need that support. Speaker, the sector enters this challenge on a more stable foundation than it has been on. When we arrived in office, construction costs were rising at 17.3%, the highest in 50 years. On last count, they were rising at 1.8%, Speaker. That doesn't mean there won't be challenges ahead, and we'll work with the sector in partnership to manage them.
The call to the honourable member for Curtin.
This is a question for the Attorney-General. It's coming up to a decade since the implementation of the robo-debt scheme, but there's still no mandatory framework for the use of automated decision-making in government. And now there are real community concerns about the use of automated decisions in aged care and the NDIS. You engaged in a community consultation on automated decision-making well over a year ago. When can we expect to see a legislated and mandatory framework for automated decision-making in government to prevent a repeat of robo-debt?
Call to the Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question and her ongoing interest in this important reform. The Albanese government is working to protect Australians against a repeat of the former Liberal government's illegal and immoral robo-debt scheme. We are developing a consistent whole-of-government framework for the use of automated decision-making, or ADM, implementing recommendations of the Royal Commission into the robo-debt scheme. Responding to the Royal Commission with durable reform is a priority for the government, particularly where it strengthens the integrity, lawfulness and transparency of Commonwealth decision-making. For the benefit of the House, ADM refers to the use of automated systems to carry out administrative actions and make decisions. So, for example, when you receive a Medicare benefit on the spot instead of lodging a claim, that is an automated decision. A well-designed ADM framework will achieve much, including improving accuracy and consistency of administrative decisions, embedding robust safeguards, ensuring ADM tools are used lawfully, responsibly and with appropriate human oversight. It will also enhance public trust by providing transparency about when and how automation is used in government, but it will also lift productivity and service delivery performance, enabling faster, more reliable services that are aligned with community expectations. I can assure the member the framework is being developed carefully and methodically to ensure that it supports innovation whilst maintaining strong protections for individuals, especially where decisions affect rights, entitlements or obligations, and striking that right balance is essential. The government has undertaken extensive consultation, including with the public, to ensure the framework reflects community expectations. Ongoing engagement is also occurring across government to inform the design of the framework, including work with agencies that do have significant experience deploying ADM in their frontline services. The Albanese government's approach is future-focused and it's on delivery. It ensures Australia can responsibly adopt new technologies, derive better quality services in a more timely way and avoid the types of systemic failures identified by the Robo-Debt Royal Commission. When I'm in a position to provide further information on the timing of these well-advanced reforms, I'm more than happy to engage with the honourable member and any other interested members.
Give the call to the honourable member for Griffith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government improving access to free health care for all Australians?
Call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and the member for Griffith. She's made a terrific contribution already in her first year in this place, and I know that in health that contribution is very much shaped by her time as the CEO of the Kookaburra Kids Foundation, a terrific service that supports kids who are impacted by family mental illness. By the time Parliament returns, Mr Speaker, it will be a year since the last election. And we have been busy delivering on all of the promises, all of the commitments that we made to the Australian people back in last May, including to strengthen Medicare, Mr Speaker. Now, central to that particular commitment was the record investment we made to turn around bulk billing on the 1st of November, Mr Speaker, and already more than 3,600 general practices across Australia now are bulk billing all of their patients all of the time. Now, we didn't expect to get to that number until 2028, but we are there already. And I'm pleased to say, in the member for Griffith's electorate, the number of 100% bulk billing practices has doubled since November, Mr Speaker. But we're also delivering new models of care to better meet the needs of modern Australia. Today we've got 134 Medicare urgent care clinics open for business, delivering high-quality urgent care for people who have non-life-threatening emergencies, Mr Speaker. More than 2.7 million Australians fully bulk billed. And on January the 1st, 1-800 Medicare opened for business. It is delivering high-quality health advice 24/7, 365 days a year, as well as a referral to a free telehealth consult with a GP after hours on weeknights and right across weekends if the triage nurse thinks that's appropriate. But today I particularly want to say that the Assistant Minister for Mental Health and I were delighted to announce the next phase of Medicare Mental Health Check-In. Again, a service that's convenient, that's free, that's backed in by Medicare. And from this week, that service will also provide Australians with low-intensity therapy services online, over the phone, by qualified professionals, particularly for Australians who are experiencing more moderate or more temporary episodes of mental distress. Better care for them, of course, but also taking pressure off the higher intensity mental health services. Importantly, no need for a GP referral. Importantly, no out-of-pocket expenses. And importantly, high-quality care backed in by Medicare, Mr Speaker. That's 12 months of delivering on our commitment to strengthen Medicare, changing the lives and making a real difference to millions of Australians.
Call to the Deputy Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister list who will be classified as a critical user under the National Fuel Security Plan?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question. And the National Fuel Security Plan, as agreed by National Cabinet, does say that there would be preference given to critical users such as life-supporting services, utilities and emergency services. Also relevant, Mr Speaker, although we've made very clear we do not contemplate needing to use the Liquid Fuel Emergency Activities Act, the instrument that is current outlines the essential and critical services. They are an ambulance service, a corrective service, a fire or rescue service, a police service, a public transport service, a state emergency service or equivalent organisation or a taxi service. Mr Speaker, this is determined by determination issued by the Minister for Energy. I'm happy to table the current determination, which reads, I, Angus Taylor, Minister for Energy, make the following determination.
I want to give the call to order. Order. When the House comes to order, I would like to hear from the honourable member for Cunningham.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What action is the Albanese Labor government taking to reform higher education and build the workforce of our future?
give the call to the Minister for Education.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank my friend, the classy member for Cunningham, for her question. Can't get anything past you, Daz.
Order.
Mr Speaker, under Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, the number of kids finishing high school jumped from about 40% to 80%, and that was nation-changing reform. It created businesses and a workforce that otherwise wouldn't exist. And a couple of years ago, I released the Universities Accord. What that says is that over the next few decades, we'll need a workforce where 80% haven't just finished school, but they've gone on to TAFE or to university as well. And the Accord sets out a plan for us to get there. Over the last few years, we've bitten off a big chunk of it. We've cut student debt. We're rolling out paid prac for teaching students and nursing students, midwifery students and social work students. We're rolling out free TAFE and study hubs in the bush and now, for the first time ever, in the outer suburbs. And we're funding more places at university. And this week we took the next step. This week, just yesterday, we passed legislation to set up the ATEC. That's the Australian Tertiary Education Commission. And that'll help us to break down the barrier between TAFE and university, make it easier to move between the two, make it easier to get a degree cheaper and faster. And it'll also help to end the hunger games where universities are eating each other alive for students. Instead, the ATEC will allocate places to individual universities. And it will also help more kids from poor families, from the regions and from the bush to get a crack at going to uni in the first place. In the next few months, I'll introduce legislation that will guarantee a place at university for kids from poor families, from the regions and from the bush, if you've got the marks or you've got the skills to take on a degree. If you've got what it takes, you will get a place. And the Australian Tertiary Education Commission will help us to roll all of that out. That'll change what universities look like. But we've also got to change the way universities act. Students have got to be their top priority, and that's what the Student Ombudsman is all about. The boards of universities have got to become more accountable, and that's what the next stage of reform is all about, including the use of consultants. And the university regulator, TEXA, needs better powers to be able to act where universities don't or won't, and that legislation is coming too.
The call to the member for Calare.
To the Prime Minister. The Great Western Highway is closed indefinitely, and 2 days ago a car accident on Chifley Road shut down all access in and out of the Central West. Ian Fitzgerald, who operates ICF Haulage, has 14 permanent employees. He's about to start laying them off because this closure is sending the business broke. Last week in Question Time, you said that the truth is that all governments, state and federal, should have done something about this. It's true. So will your government now lead on delivering a support package for our local businesses being smashed up by this closure?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Calare for his question, and it follows a question he asked in the House last week. I committed then to speak to Minister Aitchison, Jenny Aitchison, in New South Wales, and I did so, as did the Minister for Transport here. We've also been closely engaged, of course, with your colleague on this side of the House, the member for Macquarie, who has been very concerned. I visited Mount Victoria and that part of the community with the member for Macquarie on a number of occasions over the years, so I'm very conscious that if the road there is shut, then it has a real impact on the wonderful small businesses delivering services, in particular in the tourism sector, but others as well in that community. As you're aware, it remains closed at Mitchell's Causeway following what was a major geotechnical failure. New South Wales has advised that the road is not safe and it can't reopen until it is safe, and there can't be any shortcuts when it comes to safety. Management of the closure and the reopening decision, of course, sit with the New South Wales Government, who are responsible for that area of the road network and the expert advice that they receive. Now, it is expected Based upon that advice, the New South Wales Minister informed me that it's expected to remain in place for at least 3 months. This is a serious issue. The Australian government has announced assistance for small business today, including temporary tax relief for businesses unable to meet their tax obligations due to fuel supply issues, but it also includes more generous payment plans, remission of interest and penalties, and supporting varying PAYG, pay-as-you-go instalments where there's been a downturn in taxable income. New South Wales has also put in place significant support for business and commuters. I'm happy to continue to work with the member, as will the Minister for Small Business, the member for Cowan, and others on this side of the chamber, as we will continue to work with the member for Macquarie as well, because we are aware, very conscious of the fact that this has occurred at absolutely no fault to any of the communities there, and that is why they are deserving of support.
Give the call to the member for Canberra.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering cost-of-living relief for Australians, including in the social services portfolio, and are there any risks to this? Well done.
Give the call to the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and thanks so much to the member for Canberra for her question. I was really pleased this morning to visit Vinnie's Samaritan House here in Canberra with the member for Canberra and to meet Brett and Elizabeth and the whole team there at Samaritan House. And we know that members right across this parliament love the work that Vinnie's and services like Vinnie's do around Australia, helping people at times of need. The war in Iran is a long way from Australia, but the impacts are being felt here. We're doing our very best to make sure that we're keeping the fuel supplies coming, but we're also doing our best to help Australians with the cost of living and the pressure that that's putting on Australian families. So I was very pleased today to be able to announce that the Albanese Labor government is investing an extra $11.7 million in emergency relief funding for services like Vinnie's and others right around Australia. That includes $8.5 million for 196 Commonwealth-funded emergency relief providers. Those services will get an extra 15% on top of their annual funding. We announced that today. That'll help them with things like food parcels for families that need that help. We're also putting almost $2.25 million extra into financial counselling and an extra $1 million for emergency relief providers that are in those top-end areas that have been impacted by Tropical Cyclone Narelle. The extra funding has been welcomed by Uniting Care, Anglicare, the Salvation Army and, of course, St Vincent de Paul Society. Vinnie said, and I quote, "This funding is welcome and necessary." Anglicare said, and I quote, "This funding will help make sure people can get support when they need it most." Of course, we're investing almost $460 million over 5 years in supports like this. When those opposite were in government, they cut $20 million a year from these programs. But that's not all we're doing to help Australians with the cost of living. Of course, there's tax cuts and more tax cuts coming for every taxpayer. We've been supporting wage increases, paid parental leave, expansion, 3-day childcare guarantee, cheaper medicines, more bulk billing, 5% deposits for first home buyers, free TAFE, cutting student debts. And, of course, since we came to government, age pensions have gone up by about $5,500 a year. Unemployment benefits have gone up about $4,300 a year. And Commonwealth rent assistance has gone up $1,900 a year. Those opposite are interjecting. When you were in government, you tried to cut $1 billion from pensioner concessions and raise the age to 70.
The minister's time has concluded. Resume your seat. I'm not sure what the manager was doing there, but I'm just going to ask him to... Well, whatever you're doing, don't do it. hear from the honourable member for Capricornia.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Has the government received advice of any additional fuel ships bound for Australia that have been delayed or cancelled?
Call. Order. 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 The member for Nichols. Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister has already answered that question. The answer is no. The answer is no.
Order.
Mr Speaker, the situation remains, as the government has said on multiple occasions. There were 6 ships scheduled to arrive sometimes in April that were cancelled, and they have been replaced and then replaced by more with 3 spot cargoes, and I expect that number of spot cargoes to increase materially with the passage of the government's bill to enable Export Finance Australia to support the import of fuel. And I can confirm that for the month of April, orders that are finalised and confirmed amount to 2 billion litres of diesel, 719 million litres of petrol and 740 million litres of crude. Now, Mr Speaker, I'm not quite sure what case the opposition is trying to make here, but the case that the government is making is that the international circumstances are very uncertain. There is a massive impact on the global supply chain of oil and petrol, as we have been saying all through March. But our job is to secure, as best we can, the supply of fuel in those circumstances, and that's exactly what we've done. And we have provided information on that transparently each and every day, and I'll continue to do so over Easter, Mr Speaker.
The call to the honourable member for Melbourne.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Prime Minister. At a time of global uncertainty and economic pressure, how is the Albanese Labor government fulfilling its commitments and delivering for Australians?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Melbourne for her question, the best member for Melbourne we've had here for some time. Mr Speaker. We have always looking for unity, Mr Speaker. Always looking for unity across the parliament. Mr Speaker, we know that Australians at the moment are feeling anxious about what is happening on the globe. They watch it. The Middle East war means there are real pressures on people. The uncertainty that's there from how it will end, when it will end, means that uncertainty is there. We acknowledge that. We're dealing with it. The job of leadership is to deal with immediate issues as they arise, but also to always have your eye on the horizon and how we build a stronger Australia going forward. And that is what we have responded to the biggest spike in global fuel prices in history by cutting the fuel excise in half, establishing the National Strategic Reserve, delivering a national fuel security plan to make a real difference. But at the same time, we've been focused on the agenda that we took to the election last May. Just this week, we have delivered on better wages, fairer prices and a stronger Medicare. We've abolished unfair junior pay rates. We've ended credit and debit card surcharges. We've taken action on unfair hidden fees and subscription traps online. And from today, Medicare mental health check-in service has started. From today. Another week in a year of delivery, ticking off our commitments one by one. 134 Medicare urgent care clinics open, just 3 to go. Cheaper medicines, more GPs bulk billing every patient. The biggest ever investment in women's health, including 33 endo clinics. 230,000 Australians owning their own home for the first time with just a 5% deposit. The 20% cut to student debt delivered. Gender pay gap at an all-time low. Over 300,000 families and businesses with a cheaper battery going forward. $10,000 incentives for construction apprentices and paid prac. 750,000 enrolments in free TAFE. An income tax coming in
Order.
July.
Member for Goldstein.
This is the last question time,
Order.
of course, before the budget. We haven't bothered to have a question from the Shadow Treasurer in the last question time before the budget. It shows that their focus is not on talking Australia up, just talking things down.
Order. Prime Minister.
And on that note, Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.